Tanager is here for children, teens, young adults, and families as they navigate the many stressors of the world today. Tanager inspires, empowers, and heals by providing tools and support needed to navigate the hardships of life and overcome obstacles. Our expertise and specialty trainings offer a wide range of approaches, and we'll join alongside you to create solutions to enhance your wellness. We are here for you and your family. Tanager, inspire, empower, heal.
Tanager and the Meraki Institute of Learning proudly present Together We Rise, a series based on the RISE Wellness and Resilience Framework. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, this show is a series digging deep and bearing witness to the stories regarding challenges that youth and vulnerable populations face within systems in our community. We hope this series will inspire hope and possibility to create a ripple effect, empowering community action and encouraging you to recognize the power of advocacy. The power of your voice can be a shining light, promoting change in systems that can better offer resilience and wellness in the life of youth and families. Because when we call on our courage and show up in the midst of barriers, we offer a bright place, inspiring ourselves and others to recognize that hope is possible and to not give up, because the youth of today and future generations need us. Together we can rise. Carol, thank you so much for being here with us today. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So I have been working here in Cedar Rapids in the mental health field for more than 30 years, about 33, 32 years, something like that. So my very first job right out of graduate school was at St. Luke's, working in a day treatment intensive outpatient program for youth. And I did that for 6 or 7 years, and then I left for a bit and worked for Grantwood AEA as a school social worker. And then came back to St. Luke's in 2003 and have kind of progressed through a few different roles. Up until the last 6 years, all of my experience has been with kids and families, and that's really where my passion is. The last 6 years, I transitioned into the Director of Behavioral Health Services at St. Luke's, so that's broadened my perspective a little bit in terms of working with adults and a little bit more focused on leadership. But a lot of my passion is still working with kids and families and really trying to help them figure out how the system works and get them connected with the services that they need.
Yeah, well, Carol, what amazing experience. And it lends so much to what we're going to talk about today, because you've really seen it all then.
I've seen a lot.
And just the titration of services and the gaps and the needs. And that's so much of what we're talking about in this series. Really, for a lot of reasons, to bring awareness to people who may not be as familiar with the services that touch kids' lives, but also for some advocacy, because we know that we can continue to make improvements so that kids have better outcomes. Throughout your career and currently, what have you seen as some of the biggest needs in relation to kids' mental health and the system that really touches their lives?
Yeah, so I think of a few things. What I think about recently, and especially in this role at the hospital, is really some need for some crisis services. So, if one of our kids is sick, or your family member's sick, or you're in a crisis, you often go to the emergency room. That's where we go. That's where we've been trained to go. And unfortunately, that's really not always, we can't serve kids and families as well as we would like to in the emergency room. And many times, I think that if there were some things leading up to that crisis point, maybe we could avoid that. And again, if you've ever been to the emergency room with a family member, it's not the most fun experience either. You end up sitting in a waiting room for a long time, and it's anxiety provoking because you're not sure what's going to happen. sometimes when you go for a medical reason, you do sort of know what's going to happen. They're going to do some blood work, they're going to run some tests, maybe get an x-ray, and then they're going to know what to do with us. That's not always the case when it's a mental health concern. And on an inpatient setting, we can really only take those people who are a danger to themselves or others. And if you don't really meet that criteria or fit in that box, then probably we can't admit you into the hospital. And so then what happens next? And there's not really good services for that then what, you know? We try our best to connect people with outpatient services or connect them with a psychiatrist. So that sort of leads to the next issue, you know, how do you get in to see somebody in a timely manner? And if you're feeling like you're in a crisis now, we can get you in, you know, 2 weeks or 2 months or whatever that is, and it starts to feel sort of hopeless for people. So that's definitely, you know, I think at the top of my list right now. Things have evolved over time with insurance providers and how we cover things that have sometimes helped and sometimes thrown more hurdles in front of families and kids. I don't think we do as good of a job of that early identification and screening. You know, we talk about, when I talk with other professionals, you know, we screen for vision and we screen for hearing and all of those things, but it feels like it's a struggle to get those basic screenings for mental health concerns.
Yeah, Carol, so much of what you're talking about is exactly what I think needs to be a part of this conversation. So I'm going to kind of break things down a little bit. In particular, let's go back to kind of that concept of the ER, because I'm guessing ERs were not designed to be an access point for mental health emergencies, right?
Yeah.
And so how did we get to this place?
That's a great question. You know, I don't know how we got to this place. I don't think, except that there's not a lot of stopgaps in the meantime. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing.
Yes.
And
because there's nowhere else to go.
There is nowhere else to go.
Sure.
And I'm not sure that there ever was any place else to go. I think that we have had a history in our society to sort of brush some of this stuff under the rugs and not wanting to talk about family members that are struggling with their mental health concerns. And I do feel like some of that is getting better, you know, particularly young people. I hear young people talking so much more about their mental health.
So the stigma in some ways is going down a little bit, but with that comes this need and desire for access to services that just may not exist at the same level that they're needed as experienced by kids and families in our community.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I don't know the history to ERs either, you know, but I know that they're not designed to be the access point for mental health, and they're not designed to be the place to stabilize kids in our communities. But I hear you saying that right now, that's really the only place that kids can go. That's the only place that maybe you can access a person to give you some hope or relieve the immediate stressor at play.
Yes, yes. It's the only place 24/7 that's open for people to go when I'm in a crisis and I'm worried that somebody isn't safe.
Yeah.
So that might be, you're worried that, you know, they're feeling suicidal and may actually act on that, or sometimes families just aren't even sure they can keep each other safe from each other because it's reached such a crisis point in their homes.
So one of the gaps I hear you already talking about is needing a place other than the ER for kids to go to really assess what are those needs in place and what are the appropriate services, not 3 weeks from now, not a month from now, that can help in this immediate moment. What would that look like?
You know, so recently in our state and in our communities, we have mental health access centers. The one in Cedar Rapids, Lynn County Mental Health Access Center, is moving towards being open 24/7. They're not quite there, but that's a place where there's crisis stabilization for folks, where they can go and spend a few days if that's what they need to do. They are triaged by some of our good friends and colleagues from Foundation 2 who do that work beautifully. but that's just for adults. So you have to be 18 years old to access those services at those mental health access centers right now. We can utilize Foundation too, and they provide such a fabulous service to our community. But for kids and families who feel like, I need something a little bit more, maybe more than 24 hours, more than a couple of hours to stabilize this situation, we need something like that for youth in our community. And we're just not there. We're just not there yet. I know that there's some things happening, and I'm excited that they're going to be, cropping up in our community. But I think that's one of the things that really could make a difference.
Yeah. It's like you said, when you walk through that ER door, they're not there to say, oh, let's sit down and hold space for this crisis in this moment, although they do a beautiful job at that, because I'm sure they see such an array of things. But the experience there, a family could be sitting for 8, 24, 72 hours, and that means taking off work. That means maybe not caring for other kids in the home. The drain on the family unit in itself to make sure that your kid is getting the services that they need weighs on the whole system.
Yeah, it really does. And you sort of know what to expect when you go in because, your child fell down and broke their arm.
Yeah.
This is so new for many families too. And so when you walk in the emergency room for the first time with your child who's experiencing some sort of mental health crisis, it's scary.
Yeah.
It's scary for the child, and it's scary for the family, and you just don't know what to expect. So if we could do that in a different way, we have to do things a certain way at the hospital because our credentialing bodies tell us we have to do them a certain way in the hospital, and it's not always the most friendly way. I mean, I think we do the best job we can with what we have, and we want it to be a place where people feel safe coming, but we also know it's probably not the best way to do it sometimes.
Yeah. But I'm sure for families it feels like it may be the only place,
Absolutely.
the only entry place. Carol, you talked about screenings, and so when we talk about the hospital, we're talking about we're now in a full-blown crisis, right? But there are a lot of things we could do to get ahead of the game. What does that look like? What would that mean?
I think when you think about where do all kids go to school.
Yeah.
And pretty much all kids go to the doctor fairly regularly up until a certain...
My kid has a well child check coming up soon,
so those feel like two places where we could do some screenings to screen for some of the common diagnoses we see in kids, screen for depression, screen for anxiety, screen for ADHD, all of those things that are common in youth and treatable. We can get some early intervention. We can work with kids to better cope with those situations before it becomes a crisis.
Yeah, this seems like a no-brainer, Carol. What has stopped us from doing this? Is it just really difficult to lift up? Is there still stigma attached to this? What's holding us back?
Yeah, I think all of that, right? I think there's definitely still stigma. And it's interesting because I love to go talk to people, so I try to go talk to people whenever I can. And I was recently at Mount Mercy talking to a group of students just about mental health stuff and kind of career things. But as I started talking about mental health and stigma, it was amazing to me, these kids opening up about their own situations. So sometimes I think it's still the adults in the world who are struggling with it as much as, and maybe more so than the kids, and they don't know what to do with it. So I think there's probably a piece of education that we need to continue to talk about with the adults. And so getting that out there into the schools, getting those screening tools out there in the schools, there's still some stigma around what do we do? How do we handle it if somebody screens positive for these things? It's scary for people. It really is. And then just, I think, mobilizing around what are the tools we use. I mean, sometimes it feels like does it matter? Like, you know, so we get stuck on these things, and that's the way big bureaucracies work. I get that.
Yeah.
So there's lots of talk around what's the right tools to use.
Sure. We may not then have the resources to intervene. And that fear sometimes is holding us back from just asking the conversation. But really so much of the RISE Wellness and Resilience framework just talks about having someone that I can talk to about it. So someone even asking me the question can oftentimes directly influence my well-being going up or my suicide ideation going down.
Yeah.
But for adults, we do have a lot of fear.
Yeah.
What do you think we need to do with that fear in order to move forward and show up ready for kids in the way that they need us to be ready?
I think talk about it, right? I mean, I think just having these conversations and helping people see exactly what you said, sometimes just having someone to talk to can ease some of those symptoms.
Yeah.
If I know that you care about me enough and are going to listen to me and be there for me when I'm having those suicidal thoughts, sometimes that eases that anxiety enough to help us, you know, get to that point where we can get to that next appointment. If I am going to school and I know somebody's listening to me, even though I'm struggling, you know, internally with my well-being or questioning my sexuality or whatever that is, then I'm going to feel better about going to school. But we're afraid of that. I hear that frequently in the hospital. I'm not trained to ask those questions. I don't feel equipped if they say yes. And so then it's easier to not ask the question because we're afraid of the answer. So part of it, I think, is just having the conversation.
Yeah.
And because the more you talk about it, the easier it becomes. I have told, when I do my little talks about suicide prevention and just the suicide screenings we do at the hospital, I tell people having this conversation is much like having another conversation you have with your children that also starts with S. None of us want to talk about sex with our children, but guess what? Once you start opening that door, it becomes easier to talk about because you know you're not planting that seed in their head, right?
Yeah.
So if we can get people more comfortable to just talk about their well-being. And start with yourself. You know what? I have had feelings of suicide in my life too, and it's okay.
It is.
It's okay to have those thoughts. It's okay to talk about them with people because there's people who care about you enough to listen to you. And sometimes that relief of just knowing I'm not in this alone is enough to help people feel like, okay, I can get to when I can get to that appointment. I'm going to be safe until then.
You know, Carol, you have seen so much in regards to services from outpatient to inpatient, and we certainly have a lot of gaps right now. How do you reimagine a future of mental health so that we can start to fill those gaps in a way that is needed for our youth to be healthy?
Yes, excellent question. I have the same sort of dream, I think, and I tell people all the time, this isn't magic. You know, this isn't magical. There are some skills that if you're going to be a licensed therapist, I need you to have, but talking to people and being a caring individual isn't magic. It's just that, being a caring individual. And again, I go back to the places where our kids are at school, kids are at their doctor's offices. So how can we connect them with some of those services there? You know, if we had some mental health professionals that were collaborating with physicians in their office where they could, you know, make some connections there, or the nurses, you know, have gone through mental health first aid enough so that they can start to have those conversations with the parents and kids in the office. I think, you know, kind of shifting to parents a little bit, I think parents are afraid sometimes to bring up their concerns too. They're afraid to acknowledge that their kid's really struggling because you worry it's a reflection on you somehow. Am I not a good parent? Yeah, it is so hard. So how do we connect them or make sure the people around them, again, teachers, nurses, doctors, have that basic mental health first aid sort of experience so that they can say, it looks like you're struggling with this, it's okay, you know, and normalize it. Normalize the fact that, your child might be struggling a little bit. So those are definitely some gaps. I mean, we know that we don't have enough mental health professionals. We know that it's hard to hire those people. It's hard to get them in the settings where we need them. It's hard for us to hire nurses. I'm sure it's hard for you to hire the people that you need here. That's all so hard right now. And there's no magic bullet for that either. So we have to take the people we have and figure out what training they need so they can at least be those caring and connected individuals to like just pull it together. You know, to me it's that whole systems approach too. You know, we're all connected, and how do we better make sure that family unit has the services that we can wrap around them to stay safe.
And you know,
healthy.
it makes me think, Carol, because, you know, if someone is hospitalized, which you obviously see often, then they're discharged. So they go from this, I've stayed in this hospital setting maybe 3-5 days, I stabilize, but I go back into this home environment where potentially maybe nothing has changed. And I still just have my maybe once a week outpatient therapy and my med management. And so what I hear you saying is that, you know, we have to explore other ways to get other people connected to that family, because right now the access to those true mental health supports is not changing tomorrow. It's not changing probably in a year from now. We're doing lots of work to make those changes, but we have lots of community members who maybe not in those roles, but could be volunteering or could be advocating. Those things make a difference.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. I was listening to something the other day, just triggered, I can't even remember who it was, but he was talking about how growing up, he and his brothers, they lived in inner city someplace, and they went to an after-school program. And he said, you know, if it weren't for that after-school program where they, you know, were in dramatics and you know, other things like that exposure, we could have gone down a completely different path, right? And he said, so when we were getting bullied, we told the bullies, sure, come to the after-school program and you've got to go through the drama program with us. But those sorts of things, you know, knowing that somebody cares about you, somebody's taking their time after school, you're with other people, those types of programs make a big difference for our kids, especially kids that are at risk.
When you envision this community and you see us propelling forward in the future, what are the biggest things that you think we need to continue to make generations coming up better, healthier versions?
We all have something, right? We all have something where we can step up and help our community, whether it's in your church or school or in your job somehow, you know, be a big brother for someone. All of those things collectively can make a big difference. And, you know, I personally think if there's a place where we can advocate for some changes in our system, we should, because the reality is we don't really have a system, right? I mean, we just have a collection of services out there that you have to sort of figure out how to navigate through. But we need to make sure those people know at those entry points how to get you to that next spot, and how do we hand you off in a organized and warm sort of way, so that I get to that next spot. If it's outpatient counseling, I get to that, or I get connected with a big brother if that's what my child needs. So whatever that is, those entry point people need to know what those things are. We just have to figure out how to maximize what we have, and, you know, where are the gaps? How do we lift these people, these kids and families up where those gaps are? There's a video on the Iowa ACEs 360 website about this woman, and I don't remember her name it'll probably come to me, but she talks about how she was a youth that had an ACE score of 10. And in the end, she is raising a child whose ACE score is like 2 or 3. And she talks about how along the way, the reason she feels like she's successful today is all of these people who gave her nudges along the way. So it wasn't any one magical person. It wasn't, you know, one person who swooped in and it was her therapist. It was teachers. It was DHS workers. It was advocates. It was, you know, just people that took the time to care about her. And you never know if you're the person giving that person the nudge.
Yeah.
And so I use that story all the time when I do my presentations, because sometimes in the hospital we get frustrated with people who come back and come back and come back, and it feels like they're not getting any better. And the people we don't focus on are the ones who never come back,
Yes.
right? Because maybe we help them, nudge them to the next spot.
Yeah.
We help them get connected with the next resource that they needed. And, you know, they don't always come back and say, thank you, Tanya.
Yes.
You nudged me to that next place. And, you know, you don't always hear that, but
Yeah.
you can be that caring individual, that person who is pushing someone down that path and changing their lives at any moment. I think if we could convince people to just do something and every interaction matters. Every interaction that you have with a child or a family is potentially that nudge towards raising the next generation with fewer ACEs.
Yes. What a beautiful depiction, you know, and metaphor. You know, lots of people call it like planting a seed, or, you know, we talk a lot about kids show up with a backpack at school and you're giving crayons, right? Because hopefully when they then leave, they have an entire backpack full of things, and the world is their canvas.
Yeah.
And they have the fullest opportunity to reach their potential. But we're all part of that.
Yeah.
Carol, I just want to thank you so much for being here with me today. Is there anything that you want to add that we didn't get to?
I think the one thing that I think about sometimes, though, is we often talk about how technology and social media and all of that stuff and how bad that is.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you think about how can we use some of that to better support kids and families, because we've learned so much in the last 3 years about technology, and, you know, I can go home and work from home today if that's what I have to do. And how do we use that then to reach kids and young people? I think there's lots of opportunity there that we haven't really tapped into.
Yeah. Carol, I love that you bring that up. You know, we typically navigate our world with what we know.
Yes.
And what I hear you saying is that for a better tomorrow for our kids, we have to think outside the box. We have to be creative. We have to be innovative.
Yes.
We have to show up, being willing to say yes to more than what we say no to.
Absolutely. I love that.
Well, Carol, thank you again so much for being here. Such a huge piece, and thank you for all the work that you guys are doing.
Thank you so much for having me.
No matter the challenges you and your family face, Tanager is here for you. Our team of specialists in mental, emotional, behavioral, and social health want to join alongside you during these tough times. Tanager will offer the tools needed to inspire, empower, and heal, while providing the support you need to build the strongest foundation for success and wellness. We'll meet you wherever you are in your journey, and together define a path to reach your goals. Together we rise. Tanager. Inspire, empower, heal.
Thank you again for joining us today and for spending time with us. We hope today's segment offered hope and healing. Today's series brought to you by Tanager and the Meraki Institute of Learning. For more information, please visit our website at www.tanagerplace.org.